Get lumped up tonight. Listen to Rob Rossi and RockerMike on the only podcast that I'll hear that won't make me wanna rip off my ears. Oh, the Rock Show, 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 the Rock Show. Oh, I want the Rock Show. The Rock Show, 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 the Rock Show. I want the Rock Show. Let's get lumped up.
Hello, people. Welcome to another exciting episode of The Rock Show. And today we have episode 157. And we are talking about Ike and Tina Turner. And Mike has a lot of stuff for us. But if you look at the history of Ike Turner, he was a guy that was a magic man on the stage. Like he command,
Yep.
you saw him singing, he command the pressure. He knew what he was doing.
Yeah,
He knew how to be like a band leader, so the guy was excellent.
he was a
What do you
real
got for me?
performer. He,
Oh,
he
yeah?
was a real performer. He understood how to entertain an audience. He knew. He played fantastic piano. He was a great guitar. He was a good guitar player as well. Good songwriter. Unfortunately, his whole, like some of these other people we've talked about over the years. He's a controversial guy because his legacy is totally tarnished by how he treated Tina Turner.
Yeah, but
Okay.
that was more about that movie. What love got to do for it?
Well,
People
it's a good
really
movie.
messed him up.
It's a good movie, and it's based on her book that came out in the mid '80s. So the word was already out for about 7 or 8 years about him. And I think the word had been out anyway, because when they did break up, that was kind of big news at the time in the mid '70s. He had bad cocaine addiction, big drinker. But these are the kind of things that you have to understand that happen in this industry, especially drugs and alcohol. And you just got to separate the legacy to how he was. It's kind of like Gary Glitter, some of these other guys that we've talked about that ended up in jail or this and that, or, horrible crimes. Ike Turner was a monster to Tina, but what we're going to talk about today is the music. And to me, it's some of the best, R&B stuff that's ever come out.
But Mike, he had that weird history also with other women because she already knew what she was getting into.
Oh well,
she already had that history.
and not to and Tina Turner deserves all the sympathy in the world. I mean, for what she went through, but and we'll talk about it a little bit. Is she wasn't exactly a saint in the beginning either. Okay, she when you watch the movie, they take a lot of liberties and they change some things around. Like one thing that they show is like she just sees Ike Turner in concert, falls in love with the music, falls in love with him kind of, or has feelings, and then he starts hitting on her and then they get together. Well, that's not what happened because for about a year before that even happened, she was hanging out with the band and she hooked up with the saxophone player and had a kid. Okay. I'm not putting her down. I'm just saying that's something that's not told in the story. So, you have to understand, it's a movie. Okay. There's a lot of accurate stuff in that movie. I mean, I loved how they depicted him singing Rocket 88, which is the first rock and roll song ever recorded, 1951. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Written by him, good 4 years before Chuck Berry was doing anything. Okay, so Ike Turner is one of these guys that if you know music, you have to point a finger at him and say, hey, this guy was a pioneer. Now, not only with music, but he was also involved in finding talent. He worked as a talent scout for different labels. We mentioned him in other shows where he discovered people and got them signed. Okay, sometimes to his label or other bigger labels, and of course Tina. I mean, she's a total. I mean, that voice is amazing. Okay, she was always a great performer. He couldn't have been anything without her, and she wouldn't have been anything without him. Okay, they just have that. They have that intertwined history. So to get into the Ike and Tina Turner story, I want to give a little back history on each of them. Now, Ike was born November 5th, 1931 in Clarksdale, Mississippi. So many great blues guys came out of Clarksdale. He had a very sad and unhappy childhood, which I, would think contributed to his behavior later in life. He witnessed his father beaten by an angry mob of I think mostly white people because of an affair his father was having with somebody.
Yeah, well, a white woman.
With a white woman, I believe.
Yeah.
So the father was beaten half to death, but lived another 3 years, kind of in agony, almost like an invalid, paralyzed in a sense or whatever. And Ike was probably about 6 years old when this happened, and it was traumatic to see his father just slowly suffer and die. His mother remarried, and his stepfather was a raging alcoholic and used to beat them. Okay, the mother and him. Okay, he also admitted in his autobiography that he was sexually assaulted by several women in Clarksdale at a young age, like, under 10. Okay. So, one woman, I think he used to do a little errands for, and she used to make him come in and do things, whatever. Okay. And that definitely had to mess his head up. So, through all this difficult stuff that he was going through, he developed an interest in music. He started playing piano in his teens. Soon he would get gigs with Sonny Boy Williamson II and even Duke Ellington. So at a young age, he was showing a lot of promise in music. He would put
like a self-made prodigy, pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, not a child prodigy, but like in a sense of self-taught and hanging out with. Right, playing. He couldn't read music. I think he never knew how to do that. But maybe later in life, I'm not sure. But he could play. But he could play. He played by ear, and that's usually the best. So he would put a band together eventually called the Kings of Rhythm, in the late 1940s. By 1951, he recorded the first rock and roll song, which is Rocket 88.
Yep.
And that was at the Memphis Recording Service in Memphis. Jackie Brenston, the band's saxophonist, sang lead on that song while Turner played piano. Rocket 88 is, you know, if you listen to it, it has a great distortion on the guitar, something that was never really done before. So a lot of people point to that as that's, you know, really the first rock and roll song. You have this kind of crunchy guitar sound. The guitarist's name was Willie Kizart, and you know, he's just one of these guys, I guess, kind of lost to history a little bit, but he really played that distorted guitar on the first rock and roll song.
Yeah, he played it good.
Oh yeah. Now the band, despite the minor success of the song, it did somewhat well. It created a lot of tensions in the band because the guys ended up only getting about $20 each for the song, and it was a regional hit. Okay,
that's crazy.
Yeah. So all the tensions involving that, and you know, it broke up that original version of the Kings of Rhythm. Ike would still play for the next few years in various ensembles, sometimes using different names, and that would go on for the next couple of years. Now, in 1954, he would visit his sister, Lee Ethel Knight, who lived in St. Louis, Missouri. Soon after, he would put the Kings of Rhythm back together with different lineup. St. Louis at the time and East St. Louis, which was just over the line into Illinois, were centers in the country for Black R&B music. There were a lot of clubs. There was a lot of places to play, a lot of venues, and a large audience that loved it. Biracial. Okay. I mean, there was, you know, definitely white people in the area, and it was just very popular. And it was kind of like the center of that kind of, you know, Chicago was always a blues place. St. Louis was kind of like more of a, what you would call like early rock and roll. Okay. Very, very early rock and roll before it even had a name. So Ned Love, who owned, he had a club called Ned Love's Club, okay, in East Louis. He convinced Turner to relocate to that area with the band. At the time, the Kings of Rhythm that he put together, the new version of it was still based in Clarksdale, which was kind of a haul, you know, kind of a hike from St. Louis.
It's in Mississippi, so
right, it's in Mississippi. So you know, it was definitely a place to relocate, and Ned Love convinced him to do it. So Turner and the band,
and you know that we're making more than $20.
Yeah, you'd make a little more than $20. Okay. Now by 1956, Ike Turner and the band were one of the most popular live attractions in that area of St. Louis and nearby East St. Louis. Now, prior to relocating, Turner worked as a talent scout for Sun Records. Okay, we talked about Sun, Modern Records, and also RPM Records, which were two other popular labels. Around this time, Anna Mae Bullock had moved to St. Louis from Brownsville, Tennessee. And in particular, she lived in an area in Tennessee called Nutbush. Okay, it's got a very rural area, and that's Tina Turner. Okay, Anna Mae Bullock. So a little history on her. She was born November 26, 1939, in Brownsville, Tennessee. Her family was sharecroppers, and her father was paid as an overseer for the sharecroppers, the cotton pickers, basically.
Yeah.
Now, during World War II, Anna Mae Bullock had two older sisters of which she became separated from, okay, while her parents worked in a munitions facility, a Defense Department building in Tennessee, okay. They split the family up. Anna Mae went to live with her very strict Baptist grandparents. After the war, she was reunited with her family, who would relocate everybody to Knoxville, Tennessee. When Anna Mae was 11, her mother would run away unannounced from the family. She would take off because her husband was very abusive, beat them. I think he was alcoholic as well. She ended up, the mom, in St. Louis in 1950. And in time, Anna Mae would follow her there, okay? Which is depicted somewhat in the film, What's Love Got to Do with It? See how they all got back together. Now, she began attending a predominantly black nightclub when she got there called the Manhattan Club, okay? It was here she saw the Kings of Rhythm for the first time.
Yep.
And in a short time, she fell in love with the band. She got to know the band, and she began dating the saxophone player Raymond Hill, with whom she had her first child with. His name, the kid's name was Raymond Craig Hill. Later, when she was with Ike and would marry him, the kid's name would be changed to Craig Raymond Turner. He was born in 1958. All right. In 1957, Bullock, who had tried to convince Turner for a time to let her perform on stage with him, was given a microphone from the band's drummer Eugene one night in the audience. Eugene Washington was his name, and he was the boyfriend of Anna Mae Bullock's sister, who her name was Aileen, and she was the bartender at the Manhattan Club. Okay.
Yep.
So she gets the mic, and Ike Turner was playing B.B. King's "You Know I Love You" on the organ when Anna Bullock chimed in. Okay, she just started singing, and he was totally blown away by her voice. Okay, she had this strong voice, and it was coming out of such a little skinny little girl. Okay, she was maybe 18 at the time. Okay,
Wow.
And very, very, small frame, and he couldn't believe the power of her voice.
Oh, she had lungs, man. She could sing.
Yeah. Now, he asked her if she knew more songs, and by the end of the night, she had basically joined the band.
Wow.
Okay, the Kings of Rhythm. So, still in high school, okay, Bullock would perform with the band on weekends at the local clubs. She was one of several vocalists that would be involved with the band at the time. Most of them were male. Okay, they didn't have too many other female singers. By 1958, Bullock sang on her first record, the Ike Turner written tune called Box Top. She used the name Little Ann on that. Now, the single was released on the St. Louis label Toontown Records, and Bullock later moved into Turner's home in East St. Louis, okay, where she was trained by him on vocal control and performing, okay. In the beginning, it was a strictly platonic relationship.
Yep.
Nothing going on. I mean, she did have a kid with the other guy in the band, but eventually it would turn romantic, and she would become pregnant by Ike in 1960. Now, in March of 1960, Ike scheduled his band to record a song with singer blues guy Art Lassiter. The song was called "A Fool in Love," and Lassiter didn't show up for the recording. Okay, his backup singers showed up. All right, but not, and they were called the Artettes. Okay, but the Artettes were Robbie Montgomery, Francis Hodges, and Sandra Harding. All right, I believe, not sure, but I believe one or two of them was in the original Ikettes as well. Like eventually, okay, when he got his backup singers. Now, during a gig at the Manhattan Club in East St. Louis, Ike played the record, okay? And what had happened was, because Lassiter didn't show up, Anna Mae sang.
Yep.
Okay. And it was really just going to be a demo. They weren't going to put it out. But he pressed it on a couple of copies, acetates, and played it at the club. And it took off. And there was a DJ there named Dave Dixon, from a station called KATZ. He loved it. He was in the club that night. He loved the song, and he told Ike to send it to a guy named Juggy Murray, who was the president of Sue Records in New York. Okay, now Murray got a copy from Ike right away. He mailed it to him and was blown away by Tina's vocals. Okay, so he bought the right to the song from Ike. Okay, he also offered Ike a $20,000 advance, convincing him to keep Bullock's vocal. All right, don't change anything. Keep her on that song because it was just a demo. Okay, and he convinced Ike to stay with Tina, who wasn't Tina yet. She was about to be. Okay, and make her the star of the show. So this prompted Ike to rename her Tina Turner.
Yep.
And family for the rest of her life, no one close to her called her Tina. And everybody still called her Anna Mae, her family and all that.
Yeah.
Still to this day. But what he did, very interestingly, is he trademarked the name Tina Turner.
He's very smart.
Very smart man. And the reason he did it was if she was to ever leave, he could use another woman in her place and call her Tina.
Yep.
Okay. So, little business skills there coming from Ike, right?
Who the hell would think of something like that,
You have to be a paranoid person, basically.
Or diabolical.
Diabolical, yeah, exactly. But I mean, that's the business, okay? And he was thinking ahead, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But he chose the name Tina because it rhymed with Sheena, and Sheena of the Jungle was his favorite cartoon. And at first, they were going to go by the name Ike Turner and Tina. But Juggy Murray, suggested that Ike and Tina Turner sounded better. Tina had reservations, even at that time, of continuing her relationship with Ike. She didn't know if she wanted to really be with him. Okay, they weren't married yet. They had a kid. Okay, but he had a reputation for being, he already had shown he was very controlling, and he once beat her in the head with a wooden shoe stretcher. Okay, not a good sign. Not a good sign.
Not a good sign.
Not a good sign. That's like only a sign of things to come. Okay. I had, when I did my research and I came across that, I had to think about it. Like, I've seen shoe stretchers and that's like a block of wood. Okay, like where it goes in, that's hard, man. Get hit with that in the head. Now, A Fool in Love was released and it became an instant hit starting in July of 1960. It got to number 2 on Billboard's R&B charts by mid-August. Ike would then form the Ike and Tina Turner Revue. That was the band. And it included the Kings of Rhythm male vocalist Jimmy Thomas and a new group of female vocalists called the Ikettes. As the single rose up the pop charts, it was doing well there too. They went from playing clubs to now playing theaters like the Apollo.
That's huge.
Yeah, that's very huge. So on October 3rd of 1960, they made their debut on American Bandstand when Tina was actually 8 months pregnant. Okay, and if you watch it, they hit it very well. You couldn't tell. Okay. A Fool in Love peaked at number 27 on Billboard's Hot 100, eventually selling 1 million copies overall. On October 27th, Tina gave birth to their son, Ronald Rennell Turner. The success of that single was followed by another hit called I Idolize You and the release of their debut album, The Soul of Ike and Tina Turner. And that came out in February of 1961. That same month, before a gig at the Howard Theater in Washington, D.C., Tina decided to bleach her hair. Okay, and there was some mistake in the process, and it caused all her hair to fall out. All right, I've heard of that happening. Now, to cover up the incident, I bought Tina a wig, and that wig would become part of her stage appearance. It was like a long black wig, okay, and that would be part of her stage show for a long time. Later that year, the band recorded "It's Gonna Work Out Fine." Juggy Murray is credited as the sole producer of that song, but the R&B duo of Mickey and Sylvia, okay, who sang "Love Is Strange," also contributed to the song. It became their second million seller, and later earned their first Grammy nomination for Best Rock and Roll Song. Now, the Ike and Tina Turner Revue toured a very grueling series of dates, mostly one-nighters, on what was called the Chitlin Circuit. We've talked about.
Here we go. Yep.
Chitlin Circuit again in the Deep South. Okay, they also broke a lot of racial barriers by playing in the South, because some of these were very, for the first time, very integrated audiences, and they were going crazy. Everybody was liking them. Follow-up songs include the R&B hits "Paul Fool" and "Tra La La La." Thanks to the addition of singers Stacey Johnson and Vernon Guy, Tina and the Ikettes, who at this point composed of Robbie Montgomery, Vanetta Fields, and Jesse Smith, began incorporating dance routines into their set. Okay, they were trying to build a reputation as a all-around great R&B act, kind of in the style of what James Brown was doing. Okay, a whole big show. Okay, yep. And in '62, Ike and Tina got married down in Tijuana, Mexico. At that point, they would fully relocate to Los Angeles. In November of '62, Ike and Tina filed a $330,000 lawsuit with Placid Music Corporation against Sue Records. Now, also Saturn Music and Juggy Murray for not paying certain royalties. They were getting ripped off. They also said Sue Records hid over $100,000 in royalty from their knowledge. They found out they were not only just not getting what they knew they owed, there was other stuff coming to them. Okay. Now, their last studio albums on Sue Records were "Don't Play Me Cheap" and "It's Gonna Work Out Fine," released in '63. In 1963, Ike purchased a home in View Park with an advance given by Murray for a renewed contract that they didn't sign. Okay, so it was an advance, and then he never signed. Instead, they signed with Kent Records, severing ties with Murray, who was really their manager as well. He kind of was doing a lot for them. That deal with Kent didn't produce much, so they signed to Loma Records and hired Bob Krasnow as their manager. We've heard that name before, Krasnow. Yep. He had Blue Thumb Records. Yep. Now, to make sure that he always had a record out while on tour, Ike formed various labels. Okay, and again, this is his business sense here kicking in. He had different labels that he could always put things out on. One was called Tina, one was called Pran, one was called Innis Records, one was called Sony, but not Sony. Okay, yeah. He had a name Sony before anybody, and also one called Sonia Records. He released singles from vocalists within the band and other groups as well. While Ike constantly recorded the Revue, they performed 300 days out of the year to make up for the lack of, now it was to make up for the lack of hit records. In 1964, Ike and Tina had modest R&B hits with "You Can't Miss Nothing That You Never Had" and "A Fool for a Fool." They released their first live album called Ike and Tina Turner Revue Live on Kent Records in 1964. It was their first album to chart in the Billboard charts, the Cashboard 100 chart, I should say. Cashbox 100 was another chart that was out there at the time. Yeah. Got to number 90. Their first album to chart on Billboard was a different live album called Live, the Ike and Tina Turner Show. And that was released in January of 1965 on Loma's parent label, Warner Brothers. It reached number 126 on Billboard Top LPs and number 8 on the Hot R&B LP charts in February of 65. In 1965, the duo had 2 top 40 Billboard R&B hits with Tell Her I'm Not Home and Goodbye So Long. Later that year, they re-signed to Sue, interestingly. Okay,
after they went back to
the other guy. Yeah, and released a single called Two is a Couple, which peaked at number 15 on Cashbox R&B record charts. Through 1965, the Ike and Tina Turner Revue performed in several teen rock and roll television shows, including Shindig, Hollywood A Go-Go, and, of course, American Bandstand. Yeah, now, producer Phil Spector at the time had seen them perform at a club on the Sunset Strip and invited them to appear in the concert film The Big TNT Show, which was filmed on November 29th, 1965. By the end of the year, the official incarnation of the Ikettes abruptly left and eventually formed what was called the Mirettes on their own. Ike hired a new set of Ikettes, who was Pat Arnold, who today is known as P.P. Arnold, still performs today. Okay, Gloria Scott and Maxine Smith. They were the 3 Ikettes he grabbed up. Now, eager to produce Tina, Phil Spector negotiated a deal with Ike and their manager, Bob Krasnow, who was the head of Loma Records. Spector offered $20,000 to release them from their contract and for creative control over his sessions with Tina. All right. They then signed to Phil's label, Philez Records, on March 7th, 1966. And Tina began recording the Phil Spector, Ellie Greenwich, Jeff Barry composition, River Deep, Mountain High. That was at Gold Star Studios in Hollywood. Yeah. And they did also work on an album. Okay. And the single, unfortunately, River Deep, Mountain High, failed in America. It did not chart very well. It only got to number 88.
But it did great in Europe.
Yes, did fantastic in Europe, where it got to number 3 in England. It also got to number 1 in Spain, and it was really, it was really the first time that Europe had really recognized them. Okay, and they always ended up being a little bit bigger there, like so many bands, Now, due to
I always find that amazing that they fail here, then they go to Europe, and it's like.
It happens to so many bands, and it's interesting because there was an album made along with the song, okay?
Oh, yeah?
And, the album was called, I believe it's called River Deep, Mountain High. I believe that's the name of it. And he had an album ready to go out, but because it didn't sell in the States, he only released it in the UK on London Records in September of 66. All right, so you couldn't get the record in America. He had the promotion guy from Decca Records named Tony Hall write the liner notes in the album, and it included a quote from Spector where he says, "We can only assume that England is more appreciative of talent and exciting music than the U.S." Okay, that was like a little quote from Phil Spector in there. And following their chart success in the UK, they toured with the Rolling Stones as an opening act on the 1966 tour of England. The successful 12-date tour began at the Royal Albert Hall on September 23rd. Yep. And concluded on October 9th at the Gaumont Theatre. Now, after the tour, the band stayed in the UK for a while, and they played some various club gigs. They were becoming very popular there. When they returned to the U.S., they were unfortunately involved in a serious bus accident in Wichita, Kansas.
Wow.
And a few band members were hospitalized. So Ike, what he did was he never wanted to miss a date. He recruited members from St. Louis to continue the tour with them. Tina was okay, but some of the musicians were hurt. Now, by 1967, the Revue started to book bigger and bigger venues in the U.S. They performed a series of exclusive deals during this period to help increase their finances. As their careers were rising, unfortunately, the personal relationships within the band, and particularly between Ike and Tina, was deteriorating.
Yeah.
Tina actually attempted suicide before a gig in 1968. She tried taking some pills, and luckily she didn't succeed. But, she was very upset with her life. And despite that, when you watch all those old clips, even in the Rolling Stones movie, Give Me Shelter, you see these great performance, but you just know that she was very miserable inside.
Yes, she wasn't happy.
In 68, Bob Krasnow founded Blue Thumb Records, and Ike gave him enough masters for 2 albums. So their first album was called Out of Season, and that was released in March of 1969. It peaked at number 43 on the Billboard R&B LP charts. Now, Out of Season produced the cover of Otis Redding's I've Been Loving You Too Long. Their version of that is fantastic. That got to number 23 on the R&B single charts. And in May of 1969, Ike and the Kings of Rhythm released the album Black Man's Soul on Pompeii Records. The album earned Ike his first solo Grammy nomination for Best R&B Instrumental Performance at the 12th Annual Grammy Awards. I don't think Tina was on that. I think it was just him. Pretty sure.
Yeah, that was Kings of Rhythm, not
Right, it was a solo thing. It was a solo thing. Now, in August of 69, A&M Records reissued River Deep Mountain High for the first time in the U.S., the album. Okay, so it was already 3 years old. It had never been released in the States. A&M Records put it out, and it got to number 28 on the R&B charts.
Not bad.
No, it's not bad. It's a good album. It's a very good album. The next month, The Hunter was released on Blue Thumb, one of the most, and that's kind of one of their most blues-oriented albums that they ever made. Guitarist Albert Collins is featured on the title track. The title track called The Hunter is also an Albert King cover. It reached number 37 in the R&B singles charts, and the album peaked at number 47 on the R&B album charts. And eventually, it earned Tina her first solo Grammy nomination for the Best R&B Vocal Performance Female at the 12th Annual Grammy Awards. Okay.
Wow.
So as the 60s ended, Ike and Tina began performing at rock festivals. In November of 69, Ike and Tina upstaged the Rolling Stones, opening for them at Madison Square Garden. Okay,
I can see that easily happening.
Yeah. I mean, it's shown all over the Gimme Shelter movie. Tina does this erotic performance of "I've Been Loving You Too Long." Okay, and she's wearing a short dress, and it's all glittery, and then she's got the mic.
That ass.
Yeah, she's got the mic in her hand, and she's holding the mic like it's a dick. All right, it's just any guy is just going to stare at that. And they toured with the Stones for a couple of shows, and really, some say they upstaged them, that they were actually better. At that MSG show in November, Janis Joplin actually jumped on stage as well and joined them for the song of Land of a Thousand Dances. At this point, Ike and Tina would also incorporate some Stones music and some Beatles music into their set. Okay, they would record Get Back and Let It Be. They did Honky Tonk Woman from the Stones. Their new label that they were going to be on was called Mint Records. And they did a rendition also of Come Together by the Beatles. Okay, that was in December of 69. In January of 70, Ike and Tina performed on the Ed Sullivan Show. And their performance was a song called Bold Soul Sister. And it propelled the single to number 22 on the R&B charts. In March of that year, their single Come Together, the Beatles song, peaked at number 21 on the R&B charts. Now, due to the success of their singles, they were signed to Minute Records' parent label, Liberty Records. And their next single on that would be I Want to Take You Higher, which was a cover of the Sly and Family Stone song. That was released in May of 1970, and it actually charted higher than the original.
Wow.
Okay. Billboard Hot 100, both of them made it, but she got higher than Sly. Their first album on Liberty was called Come Together, and that was released that same month, reaching number 13 on the R&B charts. The Revue's performance fee at this time increased from $1,000 per night to now $5,000 per night.
That's a nice little raise there.
Nice, yeah, a little 5 times raise. Okay, following this very successful run they were on. In July, they headlined at the Newport Jazz Festival in Rhode Island. And they also headlined at the Schaefer Music Festival in Central Park in New York City. That summer, they were featured in the Isley Brothers concert film, It's Your Thing. And they filmed Milo Forman's Taking Off. Later that year, they made their first trip to Asia to perform in China, Japan, and the Philippines.
Wow, that's a hell of a tour.
Yeah, yeah. Now, Ike and Tina began performing Creedence Clearwater Revival's Proud Mary during some live shows in 1969. Ike and Tina then released their version on the album Work Together in December 1970.
That's a fantastic version of that song.
I think it, the Creedence version is good, but I think that they just,
I just think that I could
put a different spin on it,
man.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And it has to, Tina had the sex appeal and the voice and the dance routines and everything with that, and the way it starts out slow and gets fast, it's classic. It's classic. The single was released in January of 1971, and it got to number 4 on the Hot 100, Billboard Hot 100, and it also got to number 5 on the R&B charts. It sold more than 1 million copies, becoming the duo's biggest selling single to date, and earned them a Grammy Award for Best R&B Performance by a Group at the 14th Annual Grammy Awards. So that was their first Grammy. Okay, they've been nominated before that, but
wow,
yeah. So Workin Together became their most successful studio album as well, peaking at number 25 on the Billboard Top 200, and it got to number 3 on the R&B charts. It includes the duo's social conscious track "Workin Together," great song, "Funkier Than a Mosquito's Tweeter." That's a funny song. That's a funny song. Yeah. And that was written by, I believe that was written by Tina's sister, Aileen Bullock. And 2 Beatles covers they did. They did Get Back and Let It Be. And I'll tell you this, I like their version of Let It Be better than the Beatles. I'm going to shit on the Beatles right now and say I like that better.
They did a lot. You know what? They did a lot of cover, but when they did it either better or superior to.
Well, that's the thing. I'm never impressed when people do too many covers, but when they do it in a way and they make it their own, Tina Turner did that. The Ramones did that. The Cramps did that. Okay, a few other bands that I can think of if I really try, but. Most of the times when someone does too many covers, it's just kind of like, don't you write your own shit? But I think with Tina Turner, I read something years ago that John Lennon was asked about that, and he's just like, she does it better than we do. Like that,
Yeah.
Something along those lines, he said, But in January of 71, Ike and Tina embarked on a European tour, which included dates in Cannes, in France, and also the Olympia Theater. Now, their performances, that's in Paris, their performances received rave reviews. The concert at the Olympia was recorded and released as Live in Paris. While in Paris, The Turners received the French Jazz Academy Soul Award. Ike and Tina participated in the concert celebrating Ghana's 14th Independence Day on March 6, 1971. Ghana, Africa. Okay, now the concert was filmed and released as Soul to Soul in theaters. And that was in August of 71 that came out. Now, the following month, the soundtrack...
Right, let me ask you a question. So these guys right now, they just popping music, traveling, like 300 dates. a year
Yeah.
now, or they just
Yeah. No, there's no stopping.
yeah, this
Okay.
is crazy.
Yeah, and I think that that contributed to the demise of them. Okay, they just imploded in a I mean, even if their relationship was able to be salvaged, and it wasn't. Okay, but even if you had that, the band was going to implode just on the way that Ike drove them.
Yeah, it was like holy moly.
Yeah,
They go
now
from
you had
concert to concert.
Yeah, you had to, 300 days a year singing and performing is very hard. Okay,
It's fucking insane, dude.
it is. You got no days off. A day here,
No
day
day
there.
off.
That's it. Yeah. Now, in May of '71, Ike and Tina were the opening act for Johnny Mathis at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas, performing for the first time in the main room there. Caesar's has different rooms. You got the main room, which is a big deal if you make that. Earlier in the year, Liberty Records was absorbed into United Artists Records, and that's where Ike and Tina Turner would stay. Okay, their first release on that label was the live album "What You Hear Is What You Get," recorded during their concert at Carnegie Hall in April of '71. It peaked at number 25 on the Billboard charts and number 7 on the R&B charts. The album was certified gold by 1972, and in July of '71, Ike and Tina filmed their performance at the Schaefer Music Festival in Central Park. And it aired as Good Vibrations from Central Park on ABC TV in August of '71. So it was like shown on television.
Yeah.
That's how big they were.
Huge.
Yeah. Now, also in '71, they had a top 40 R&B hit with Ooh Papa Do and I'm Yours, Use Me Any Way You Wanna. Okay. In March of '72, the Turners opened their recording studio called Bollock Sound to the public. The facilities had already been in use for Turner's production since 1970. Now, a few months later, they released the album Feels Good. 9 out of the 10 tracks were actually written by Tina.
Wow.
Okay.
That's huge.
So, yeah, and in August, they performed at Nassau County's first major rock festival, which was called the Hope Rock Fest. And that was at Roosevelt Raceway, okay, to benefit crippled children. Roosevelt Raceway is now called the Roosevelt Field Mall. Okay, it is no longer a racetrack.
Wow.
That's where they used to have trotters. I used to go there when I was a kid. And now in October, they performed It's Gonna Work Out Fine on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. The duo had moderate success with the Tina penned track Up in Here in 1972 and a cover of Little Richard's Early One Morning in 1973. In August of '73, they released their first hit record, not their first, but their major hit record, Nutbush City Limits, which was written by Tina herself. It peaked at number 22 on Billboard Hot 100, and it got to number 1 on the R&B charts. Great song. The single did even better in the UK and Austria, where it got to number 4 and number 1, respectively. In 1974, the Turners received the Golden European Record Award, and that was the first time that was ever given out to anybody. And that was for selling more than 1 million records of Nutbush City Limits in Europe. Their follow-up single was called Sweet Rhode Island Red, and also a song called Sexy Ida, and that did well on the R&B charts in Europe as well. In April of '74, Ike and Tina released the album called The Gospel, according to Ike and Tina Turner. It's a gospel record. Okay. A few months later, Tina released her first solo record called Tina Turns the Country On. Both received Grammy nominations. Ike also earned a solo nomination for his single called Farther Alone. Tina was nominated for Best R&B Vocal Performance Female for a Solo Record. She got another nomination.
Yeah.
In early '75, a guy named Gerhard August, okay, he was the co-founder of Beat Club in Germany. That was a show. Okay, that was like a Old Grey Whistle Test type of show in Europe. He was also the former head of A&R at United Artists in Munich. He became
Wow.
Ike and Tina's manager. Also, Tina performed the song "Acid Queen" in the Who's Tommy movie. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
That's a great scene, and that's one of the
It
best
was a
scenes in
great
that movie.
scene.
Yep. Now, to capitalize on her popularity in that movie, a solo album by Tina was released called "Acid Queen," where she covered the Who song and others. The lead single was called "Baby Get It On." That became the duo's last charting single together, peaking at number 31 on the R&B charts. It was a hit in Europe. Got to number 20 in Belgium, number 9 in the Netherlands. By 1976, Ike's cocaine addiction was out of control.
Yeah.
Made him, kind of like a naturally paranoid guy, made him abnormally paranoid. All right. And it was so bad that he actually burned a hole through his septum in his nose. Okay. Now, and the pain from that made him do more drugs. Okay. So he was messed up. All right. And in March 1976, Ike and Tina headlined at the Waldorf Astoria in New York City. They also signed a deal with CBS TV for 9 TV shows revolving around the Ike and Tina Turner Revue, with the possibility of it actually becoming a series. Okay, a regular series. Now, Ike was planning for them to leave United Artists for a new record company called Cream Records for a reported annual amount of $150,000 a year. The contract had a key person clause, meaning they would have to sign it within a certain amount of time, in this case, 4 days, keeping Tina contractually tied to Ike for 5 more years. Now, on July 1st, 1976, the Ike and Tina Turner Revue flew to Dallas for a gig. While en route to the hotel, Ike and Tina in the car got into a physical altercation. Okay, that's kind of shown pretty well in What's Love Got to Do with It.
It's the beginning of the end.
Yeah, I mean,
almost.
You know what? I watched it the other night just to refresh my memory, and I don't know how accurate the fight scene is, but when Fishburne pops her and she just pops him back, it was like, whoa, she clubbed him, right? And they walk into the lobby of the hotel. They're checking in, all bloodied and beaten up. All right, and everybody's just looking at them,
Yeah.
Yes. But after the arrival of them in that hotel, she fled to a Ramada Inn across the street. Okay, just to get away from him. She would hide at several friends' houses over the next few days. They missed shows because of this. Now, on July 27th. Tina filed for divorce on the grounds of irreconcilable differences. Years later, in her 1986 autobiography, Ike Tina, My Life Story, she alleged that Ike was abusive for the whole marriage, basically. Okay. And Ike claimed in his 1999 autobiography called Taking Back My Name, The Confessions of Ike Turner, that Tina instigated that last fight, so she would have a reason to break up with him before they were scheduled to sign the new contract. I don't know. Okay. Probably a little bit of each,
Yeah.
I remember in the late 90s, I got to see Ike Turner at the Village Underground. Okay. Yeah. I've never seen Tina live because I'm not a big fan of the music she did after this. Not that she's not a great performer. But I never really got into like the What's Love Got to Do with It stuff and all that, But Ike was playing the Village Underground over on 3rd Street, and he hadn't played in years, And he came out, and you could tell he was, an old man kind of,
Yeah.
But he could still play. He had a good band with him, and he talked a little bit about things, and he basically implied that things were exaggerated, and he was kind of trying to clear his name. People just listened. Nobody really responded either way or the other. But he put on a good show. You know, I mean, the guy wrote Rocket 88. Yeah, that's
the guy knew how to perform, man. The guy was a master of the stage, man. When he was there, he was the command. He knew what he wanted his band to do and stuff. And what else can you say? The guy was he was a band leader, man. A great band leader.
Yeah, you know, and unfortunately, his legacy's tarnished with all this.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm not saying he wasn't a monster, because he obviously was, but you know, it's you have to kind of separate that when you're talking about music. Now, their divorce, Ike and Tina's divorce, was finalized on March 29th, 1978. In that settlement, Tina gave Ike her share of the Bollock Sound recording studio, the publishing companies, the real estate, and he kept 4 cars. Now, Tina retained her songwriting royalties for songs that she had written, but Ike received the publishing royalties for the compositions that they wrote together. Interesting. Okay. She kept 2 Jaguars, furs, jewelry, costumes, and stuff that were all hers. And she kept her name. Okay. So that trademark thing was thrown out the window with the divorce settlement. Okay. He couldn't get another Tina Turner, okay, to be Tina Turner, you know, to perform for him. Okay. Which is probably what he wanted to do at that point. Okay. Because he wasn't going to quit. All right.
Nah,
you know,
can't quit.
Yeah. Now, what she did also was she kept the name, but she took responsibility for the debts incurred from the missed shows during that final month. And they also had a lien from the IRS for something that she controlled. She took control of that. So United Artists responded, okay, because United Artists was still signed to them, responded to this abrupt split by finishing albums from their last recording sessions. Over the next few years, Ike and Tina Turner stuff would come out. There was an album called Delilah's Power in 1977, an album called Airwaves in 1978. And in 1980, Ike released the single Party Vibes with a song called Shame, Shame, Shame on the flip side. And that was taken from the album The Edge. And that single got to number 27 on Billboard disco charts. It was like a disco song. Okay. Now, after Tina's rise to superstardom in the 80s, several compilations containing unreleased material would pop up. One was called Get Back, that was released in 1985, and an album called Gold Empire, also released in 1985. The rest is history. You know where she went. Okay, she went to superstardom. Okay. And now she lives in Switzerland very quietly. She retired. She married I want to say, I think he's a lawyer, maybe. Okay, if I remember right. You know, and a Swiss guy, white guy. God bless her, man. She's happy. She's in her early 80s now, and you know,
she's
living
like
the life.
Buddhist also.
Yes. That's depicted well in the film too. She did become a Buddhist in the 1970s, and I think she still practices that.
You want to hear something funny? Well, Ike Turner died.
Yeah.
The headline in the headline in the Porch Lights, Ike beat Tina to death.
I remember that. Yes. Ike beat Tina to death. I know.
That was the headline.
What a fucking headline!
Oh my god! And that's pretty much that. That was pretty much, man. And he passed away, and that's it, man. The rest is history. But what a life they lived, man. The music that they created, because I think they were good to for them to be with each other to start off their career, and then it just became toxic, you know.
Well, he was toxic, you know, very difficult. Yeah. Even never mind the relationship, he was just a difficult guy to work with.
It takes 2 people to be toxic.
I realize that. And I'm unfortunately, I know that a little bit from experience. But the thing is that he was just a difficult guy to work with.
Yes.
Okay. The band members had problems. The band members had problems with him. So, you know, and a lot of these, you look at his childhood, and not to make excuses, but it was fucked up. Okay, yeah. So that he even admitted in his book, he admitted because of being sexually abused, he viewed sex as power.
Wow.
Okay, so he used sex as a power over a woman instead of a lovemaking thing. Okay.
Wow.
So yeah, but I mean, the music stands the test of time. I've been listening to him a lot. In preparation for this show, and the Workin Together album, man, it's a beautiful record. It really is. Her voice is great. I always liked them. I always thought that they were a little lost in, I don't want to say lost to history, because they're not, but they're not always up front in people's consciousness about what was going on in the 60s. And she was a huge part of it. Really a huge part of it.
Yeah. And they both got indicted into both went into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Yes. What year was that? Do you know what year that was?
I can tell you right now.
Was it in the 80s or the 90s?
It was in 91. So
yeah,
Ike and Tina were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 91, and the St. Louis Classic Rock Hall of Fame in 2015.
Yeah. I mean, you can't emphasize enough how important St. Louis was in those early days. Okay, Chuck Berry, I believe he got a start in St. Louis, or he played a lot in St. Louis in the beginning. But this was like 3-4 years even before him. Okay, that Ike was there. Not Tina, but Ike.
You want to hear something? Tina also got her name on the Hollywood Walk of Fame.
Yeah.
And she was also inducted into the Soul Music Hall of Fame and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame of solo artists.
Yeah.
So she was in a lot of Hall of Fames, and wow.
And her legs were insured by Lloyd's of London.
Lloyd's of London. Lloyd's of London used to insure every wrestler, so
yeah,
if they would still get that paycheck. It's insane. The Lloyd's of London. That's pretty funny that you brought that up.
Yeah. All right, man. So if anybody wants to check us out on social media, you can find me on Instagram, RockerMike212. You can find me again on Twitter. My account has been reactivated. RockerMike212 also on Twitter. Nice. I'm on Getter as RockerMike. I'm on Clout Hub and MeWe as RockerMike. Truth Social as RockerMike. I'm on Facebook as RockoMike, because they still suck and won't let me be RockerMike. I'm RockoMike. and then also on Facebook, you got the Rockshow podcast group page. So please check all that out. Follow, subscribe, hit like, all the good stuff. Check out the YouTube channel here you're watching this on. Hit subscribe, hit like, please. And I think by the time this shows up, we might have a Rumble channel as well. So check us out over there.
Yep. We're definitely going to be going on a few shows are going to be going Rumble soon. The conspiracy show, like I told you, is going to be moving from, it won't longer be on YouTube, it'll be on Rumble. The Rock Show will still be on YouTube and probably some episode on Rumble too.
And the RockerMike and Rob Presents interview shows we'll put on YouTube as well, of course.
Yeah, those will definitely be on YouTube. It's just us interviewing people. And Mike, another great job. And people, if you want to follow me, just look Getting Lumped Up, and I'm all over the place in social media. You can find me anywhere in social media. Just type in Getting Lumped Up, and I'm on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and anywhere you can find something with drinking, I'm on there.
All right, and stay tuned for another great Rock Show episode next. That's 158, and that's going to be the making of Alice Cooper's $1 Billion Babies album. That's one of my all-time records.
Wow, that's going to be huge. That's going to be huge. So people, have a good day, and we see you in 2 weeks, baby. 2 weeks. Remember, don't get drunk.
Get lumped up.
We see you next week.
Take care, people.
will be music to your ears. You'll learn about bands you love or may not know, and it's only here on The Rock Show. Ooh, yeah, on The Rock Show. Ooh, yeah, on The Rock Show. So tell your friends and everyone you know. Let's get lumped up on The Rock Show.